How then do policy analysts and policymakers actually go about studying their alternatives? They use a variety of methods derived from different disciplines, from economics, from sociology, and from philosophy. Policymakers and policy analysts, however, tend to lean very heavily on the economic methods, because the results of which are easily quantifiable and easily compared. As such, we'll consider three different methods from the economic discipline. The first is the idea of cost versus benefit analysis. This is often the easiest to do. You look at the value spent versus the value gained, and if you're in the positive, you're good. This method is often done by think tanks and interest groups because it's easy to rationalize a project if it generates savings. And depending on the size of the savings, it might be very easy for that interest group or the think tank to sell their policy alternative to a policymaker. The next method is a little bit more difficult. It's cost versus effectiveness analysis. It works the same way as the cost-benefit analysis, however, we don't monetize the benefits. Very often, the benefits received from the policy, you can't easily put a dollar amount on. As such, we think about the cost of the policy in relation to the effect that we get to observe from the policy. The question you need to ask yourself is the size of the effects that we're observing worth the cost? Basically, again, the biggest bang for your buck. Or, more formally, which option reduces the problem at the lowest cost? The last economic method is risk assessment. This method is considered the most difficult, as you have to identify, estimate, and evaluate physical risks to the target population. In doing so, this takes the place of two steps. The first is risk evaluation. You make a determination of the acceptability of the risk, or make a decision about what level of safety for the target population is desired. Next is risk management. This is what governments or organizations do to deal with the risks, like adopt public policies to regulate them. Once you've determined the level of acceptability of the risk and how you're going to manage it, then you can choose your policy alternative. The way to think about this is perhaps taking the issue of the environment and the idea of reducing risks to the environment and society. One government agency heavily involved in assessing risks to the public is the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. Often, it assesses how much of a chemical is released into the environment. Further, it wonders how much of the chemical would humans be exposed to. And then finally, the level of toxicity or damage that might occur to that exposure. Basically, what the EPA does is considers what happens to the public or the environment if the problem is not solved. The next set of methods comes out of the sociological discipline. These methods are considered decision analysis. These methods consider prospective or future behavior and rely heavily upon projecting forward in time to understand the implications of the policy. The first method is forecasting. We make projections of what we believe will happen in the future and beyond if, well, we choose this alternative. Or in the inverse, if we do nothing. An example of this would be perhaps forecasting Social Security. What will happen to Social Security if we do nothing to address the decrease in the ratio of workers to retired, especially as more and more baby boomers retire? Or what will happen to its long-term solvency if we do something like increasing the age of retirement to 70? Ultimately, this approach tends to be pretty objective. A similar approach to forecasting is impact assessment. This analysis examines the likely effects or impacts of proposed or adopted policies. Basically, we want to know what happens, but we want to assess the outcome. A good example of this is environmental impact studies. These are done for certain actions significantly affecting the quality of the human environment. In them, we have to consider both the positive and negative environmental effects of a proposed action. Beyond these two, there are several other methods which are less used, but still as important. Some analysts engage in political feasibility analysis, basically trying to understand the degree to which policymakers will actually support the alternative. Some will engage in implementation analysis. They're concerned more about the process, not the outcomes. Others are concerned about the outcomes and engage in what's known as program evaluation. And finally, some analysts are more concerned with the ethics, drawing from the philosophical discipline. They're concerned with issues of liberty and equity.